2026 is here, and that means my wildlife pond will be turning 4 years old. It's gone so quickly, I can't quite believe it. But in this video, I wanted to talk about a few of the most commonly asked questions that I get in all of the comments of my previous videos. We'll also take a look back at a few of the highlights along the way. At the end of the video, I'll be answering your most commonly asked question, and I want to hear from you. What has been your favourite moment from the wildlife series so far? Leave a comment down below. So hello, my name is Tom and this is Only Nature. If you haven't seen my previous videos about the wildlife pond, then be sure to check them out now or after this video. I'll leave links to the playlist down below. But for right now, let's jump straight into a few of your comments. One question that I've been asked a lot, and one that I really should have addressed in the first video, is how big is my pond? And for that, we'll take a look outside at the measurements. When I first started digging my wildlife pond, I didn't really have any set measurements in mind. I just roughly knew the size of which I wanted it to be. So naturally, it did evolve slightly during this time, and the final measurements were 3.7 meters wide, 5.5 meters long, and 1.2 meters deep at the deepest point of the pond. Of course, planning any pond ahead of time is important, and size does come into that. When I was digging mine, I actually waited until I'd finished shaping the pond to exactly how I wanted it, because it did end up being larger than I originally intended. And that would have led to a few problems if I had already ordered my pond liner. So it's important to know your dimensions before you actually order that and even start to think about placing it in your pond. Which brings me onto the next question, and that is why I used a plastic liner in my wildlife pond. So I'll admit, I didn't really know a lot about building wildlife ponds when I first started this one. I'd only ever built a small one in my back garden, or a long time ago when I built one at school as part of a group effort. So going into this whole project, it was a massive learning curve. I was taking on board things that I had looked up, things that I'd seen online, other videos of people that I'd watched. And the only thing I really knew was to actually use a plastic liner and to put some kind of underlay below that. I used old carpet because when I'd moved into my house, I had old carpet left over, and so it made for an obvious choice. And some people asked why I use plastic and not clay. I knew, of course, that ponds were made using clay, but I actually thought that was reserved more for the really large-scale ponds. The clay people mention specifically is actually called bentonite clay if you want to do your own research on this. It's actually thanks to a lot of the comments that you have all left down below that I have learned so much more than I ever thought I would. It's been great to hear from all of you, so please keep those coming. Another question I get is, did I add a substrate or soil to my pond? And the answer is yes. Before filling the pond with water, I covered the plastic liner as well as I could with lots of soil. Only use subsoil and not topsoil. I actually ended up kind of mixing the two together a bit just because I was working with the space of my garden and having to move the mounds of soil that I'd created after digging quite a deep pond. And the reason to use subsoil or to purchase aquatic compost is because they're both low in nutrients, which will help in stopping algae blooms. As I built my pond during a heat wave, water was really important, and I knew that I definitely didn't want to use any tap water, as again, this is also rich in nutrients. Some people use tap water and then add chemicals afterwards, but I would always try and avoid this. The less chemicals you need to use, the better. And at the end of the day, rainwater is free. It just takes that little bit longer waiting and being patient. And so that's what I did. I was lucky enough to have a lot of rainwater stored already, and I always keep some stored I've got water butts outside. I've actually got a deep drain in the bottom of my front garden. And yeah, I tend to use that. I bought a pump so I can actually pull it up from there and push it straight into the pond if I need to. So having a constant water supply is a great idea, provided that water supply is stored rainwater. Another question I get asked is about bog filters and boggy areas of the pond. I just wanted to go with a standard pond. However, I do plan to add kind of a more boggy area, which I think I'm going to make one of my projects for this year. It'll mean some big alterations to the pond, but that's kind of the fun of it. That's what I've always said. It's the fact that I can evolve this pond over time. I can work out what works best and share that with you all. And hopefully you can share with me what works best for your ponds. And together we can all make the best wildlife ponds possible. I've also had comments about the conifers that are behind my pond. I know they're not the best trees out there. They're not actually mine, they're on neighboring property. So there's nothing I can really do for them. Nothing will grow under them or in front of them because they're actually blocking the sunlight. So I know they're not the best. I would like to add more native species and plants in and around the pond, but actually I do have to contend with the light that's being blocked out from those conifers, and they are extremely high. So that's a challenge, but one that we have to deal with. Occasionally, I still get comments about the compost bins, and I can assure you they've been on my mind a lot over the last 4 years. The compost bins that I've been saying I was going to move from basically year one, and I've never got around to it. I've always seen it as a bit more of a challenge because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that whole area, but 2026 is the year. Someone else asked about a winter berry bush for food. And I did actually grow a berry bush. I've had that as part of a thing that I was growing this berry bush from seed. And I've actually got a couple of them now in and around the pond, but they're not winter, they're more late summer, autumn. That is definitely something I would like to look into. Again, if you have any recommendations, let me know what kind of species. Another question I get asked is about mosquitoes and if I have a problem with them in the still water. And the answer is no. I'm pretty sure they're around, but for the most part, they get eaten by so many different species, amphibians, insects, and even mammals. And that's because in the water, dragon larvae will hunt mosquito larvae and eat them. I also got other predators in the water at different times of the year, like newts and tadpoles. And at nightfall, if those mosquitoes leave the waters, then they have to contend with the local bat population, which you can actually see in some of my videos swirling around the pond in those late summer nights. It's really cool. I knew that wildlife ponds obviously benefited bats, but seeing it up close and firsthand like that is really different. You can just stand by the pond and see them flying over you. It's a really great sight. Now, lots of you got in touch about my recent algae bloom problem, which last year wasn't as bad. I think the drought really impacted the state of the water. It reduced the water level so low that most of the algae couldn't survive when competing with the oxygenators inside the water. People were suggesting the barley straw, which again, I've never tried personally. I've known people that have tried that, and I think they've had varying degrees of success, but let me know, has that ever worked for you? I would be kind of interested to try it with it being more of a natural remedy. As for the algae, it's just a case of managing it for now and hopefully adding more plants again this year. If I can add plenty of plants, even things like a floating willow in the water, that should help pull out those nutrients. But too much algae is worrying for the pond, but it's not the end of the world if there's still a little bit of algae in there. Another question I get asked is, what camera do I use when filming wildlife at the pond when I'm not actually there? And that is, of course, my trail camera. It has been the staple for wildlife pond footage. I've always been kind of obsessed with them, the fact they can see in the dark, the fact you just walk away and leave them and you have to wait to sort of know what's been captured. It's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend it. If you're looking for something in your garden just to add a bit of interest, then why not try a trail camera? The camera that I used to film the robin nest was actually the Green Backyard camera. I've got videos and reviews of that camera and hope to be working more with Green Backyard this year. I really like their products. I think they're really great. It works really well for that. Obviously, I would never disturb a nesting bird. I actually placed the camera before the nest was fully built. I just noticed that the robin was taking material in and out of the bush, and I set up the camera when the robin had left, and I did as little interference as possible. I just placed the camera in and left, and then I can do everything else remotely and on my laptop. So really great footage. I've really loved having that. I love robins. I know a lot of you out there do too. And it was just really great seeing something that basically nobody ever saw a few years ago. Now, by far the most commonly asked question is, will I be adding fish to my pond? I initially wanted to. When I actually built this pond, I built it so deep with it in mind for fish, so that during winter months they would have a nice deep reservoir of water to avoid the cold. Typically, those sort of deep areas tend to stay the same temperature all year round, which is ideal for fish living in them. I would love to add some kind of little minnow or maybe sticklebacks, just in the hopes of one day attracting kingfishers. But I think the opportunity to attract them is so small that it actually doesn't outweigh the harm that the fish would do in terms of adding more nutrients to the water, but also eating things like the dragonfly larvae, the dragonfly eggs, tadpoles, and just various other things, depending on what I would add in. And it might put off things like the newts and frogs from obviously spawning in this pond. Maybe one day when I build a much larger pond, I will do the best of both worlds and try it. But for right now, I think the answer is no. And that's it for questions. I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's probably been a bit of a different one, but kind of a catch up to anyone who's missed out on the previous updates. As you know, I still have lots planned for the wildlife pond series. I'm going to carry it on this year. So again, if that's something you're interested in, please subscribe, leave comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.